Welcome to the Reprofiles, where infertility meets injustice and nothing is off limits.
We're two nurses. We're certified reproductive health advocates, and we're here to tell you everything they didn't.
From the broken systems to the heartbreak left behind, we're here to connect the facts, the policies, and the pain.
Because silence isn't safety, and we're done being quiet.
This is the Reprofiles.
Infertility, injustice, and all things nobody warned you about.
Welcome back to the Reprofiles, everybody. Today, we're going to decode yet another shiny new acronym because apparently the fertility world didn't have enough acronyms already, AnnMarie.
Oh, yeah, the whole fertility world is just alphabet soup. It's IVF, it's ART, it's HSG, it's SIS, it's SA, it's IUI, it's VOR.
Yeah, it's
So many.
painful, right? And don't forget my personal favorite, the WTF call, which I will
Oh, yeah.
tell you, for a very long time, I thought it meant exactly what you thought it meant. And then I heard the first patient say, I want to do my Y transfer failed call. And I was like, it doesn't stand for what the F? But what the F is what they say when they get their first bill.
Yeah. Well, today's new acronym that's floating around, that's hot topic, is RRM.
That's right, everybody. Restorative Reproductive Medicine. And if you're thinking, ooh, that sounds very holistic and revolutionary, buckle up. Because we're going to take a deep dive into what that actually is, what it claims, and what it means for our patients, for the political landscape, and for the newest buzzword in the field, which is personhood.
Yeah, so let's start with what it is. What is its definition? According to the International Institute for Restorative Reproductive Medicine, because that's what RRM is, because there is a whole institute for this, it's about finding what's broken, fixing it, so conception can happen naturally.
In theory, that doesn't sound terrible, except isn't that what fertility clinics already do?
Yeah, we already do all of that in the pre-labs. We check thyroid, we check blood sugar. We do HSGs, which is the test that, the dye test to make sure that the tubes are nice and open. We do semen analysis. We do repeat pregnancy loss panels. You name it, we got it. That's the diagnostic foundation of every fertility practice.
It is. That's what's so frustrating. When I first heard the term RRM a couple of years ago, I myself was like, okay, awesome. Like, this sounds very good. We should totally look into the underlying reasons for XYZ. But then I started seeing it going down a path where it claims that it is essentially RRM claims that things like ART, which stands for assisted reproductive technology, that ART, and one of the things in ART is IVF. And again, this is why it's alphabet soup, because we're going to keep you caught up. So IVF is a form of ART. IVF is in vitro fertilization. So their claim is that IVF doesn't fix anything. It just bypasses a problem. So
that's like saying, that's like saying a cardiologist can prescribe statins, but won't do a bypass, even if your artery is like 99% blocked.
it makes no sense. And that's a great example that you give, because it's just like, a lot of underlying infertility is from a tubal factor. If you have fully blocked tubes, there's some tubes that no restorative anything is going to open scarred, closed tubes. That's just not going to happen. Right. So I love that example of the cardiologist, and I'm not going to go do bypass, because the bypass is very much like the IVF. We're bypassing the fallopian tubes when they're damaged. Or imagine, oh my, if men with ED were told, oh, sorry, no sildenafil for you, aka Viagra, I just don't want to get sued. Just vibe harder with your arteries. Can you imagine the outrage?
Oh my God. There would be a full-on, executive order legislation would be passed in no time. Are you kidding me?
Mutiny, right? And that's where, obviously this isn't the topic of our chat today, but it's very frustrating to me when I hear certain groups of folks demonizing gender affirming care when there is no better example of gender affirming care than ED meds. I'm just saying. Okay. I'm just saying.
I'm not
Anyway,
saying,
but
I'm just saying.
exactly. And I said what I said. So here's where it gets sticky though. Okay. Earlier this year, we all remember this, not only last year during the election cycle, where we promised IVF for all that need it and all the things, but then the administration touted an executive order to provide recommendations for IVF coverage. And everyone got really excited.
Oh my god, that was so exciting. But spoiler alert, it expired in 3 months. And tucked into that fine print, a nod to RRM.
Yep. And that was so frustrating because I think initially, folks, you and I and other experts in the field, we knew that that was a red herring. We knew that. We knew
Absolutely.
that there
Yeah.
was never any real intention to expand access. That was just an empty campaign promise. Yeah, it was just an empty promise, and he preyed on people's infertility. It preyed on them in general. And so then it felt less like a lifeline for IVF patients and more of a bait and switch to elevate restorative reproductive medicine as a natural alternative. What's unnerving about that is that you and I both know that we wouldn't be doing IVF if there was an easier way.
Yeah.
You and I both know that if there was a better way, every single one of us in this field that has been researching and has been fighting like hell to get our industry the exposure it needs so we can get the research dollars even. But at the end of the day, we both know that if there were something easier, we would have already been doing it. And so when RRM claims to have the same success rates as IVF, then I start getting very suspicious because I feel like folks are being misled.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder, is this really about helping patients, or is this, appealing to a certain conservative anti-IVF base under the guise of restoring health? That's where my mind goes is, hey, isn't this amazing? It's all natural. Good for you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not. Natural things are good. And trying to find the root cause of something is absolutely key, but it's very different, philosophies under the RRM method.
Yeah, and when you conflate the two as having equal outcomes, that's where both of us kind of go, wait a second, this isn't really about what they're saying it is. Let's dig a little deeper. Let's look under the hood. During COVID, I think folks were, as we were moving towards COVID, there were a lot of people that have been injured in some way by the medical systems, need to just throw pills and treatments and surgeries at everything. And so, because for so long we shunned the idea of natural things being helpful, I think there was the pendulum always swings, but it doesn't go back to the middle. It goes to the other side. And so then when COVID happened, I think folks were really, really more interested in how can we do things in a healthier, safer way. And of course, people were very nervous about the speed with which the COVID vaccine was released. And I can understand that. I can also understand that a once in a lifetime pandemic, desperate times call for desperate measures. But that's where the vaccine skepticism started.
Mhm.
Not that there hasn't always been pretty widespread skepticism by some groups, but it was the fact that that kind of came on the scene while folks were already looking for more holistic things. And so,
Mhm.
as you said, under the guise of restoring health. But anyway, that brings us though to the P word.
The P word, what's that? Politics? Period? Pickle?
Be any one or all of the above, that but in this instance, the big bad P word, personhood. And so let's explain this. Personhood is an ideological stance that a life begins at conception, and because life begins at the moment of conception, embryos deserve full legal rights as if they were a full person, hence the name personhood.
And remember Alabama? IVF clinics were shutting down overnight because of this court ruling.
Yep. And, I had been saying, as you and I both have been very active with Resolve over the years and through their federal advocacy day, we've had a
Mhm.
lot of conversations with lawmakers in DC on this topic. And I can remember shortly after Roe was overturned, the next advocacy day, I remember bringing up to one of the legislative aides we were talking to in one of the conservative offices and bringing this topic up and saying, this is what's going to happen. And it was, that's very alarmist, that's very extremist.
Yeah.
And
That would
then
never happen.
exactly. And it's absurd. Embryos that don't implant now become evidence of malpractice, manslaughter. I mean, this really opens up a huge can of worms. And there again, if you use an ideology to legislate, you've by definition left out a lot of people.
Shows that you're gonna have miscarriages and or chromosomal abnormalities, and that's why there's a problem with, like, this whole personhood thing. So
Yeah.
whose fault is it gonna be if it doesn't implant? Is it the embryologist? Is it the uterus? Is it the patient? Like, are we gonna sue your uterus, for not accepting this embryo? I don't know. Where does it stop?
Well, and exactly. There is a misunderstanding amongst the public regarding early pregnancy loss and how common it actually is. And that no, a fertilized egg does not equal life because there's a whole big long journey between the moment of fertilization and a living human that can come out of a body and live on its own. And so actual living children are going hungry. And we're saying that frozen embryos need a constitutional lawyer so they can, their host can drive in the HOV lane. It's really kind of that absurd. I really like that you brought up this idea of fault because what they don't realize, I think what some folks legislating on that side of the aisle don't necessarily realize is that this is not something that's just going to affect others. This is a slippery slope. So, what happens
Absolutely.
when your conservative niece or your conservative young friend has a miscarriage and is all of a sudden charged with manslaughter because she miscarried?
Elizabeth, that's alarmist.
I was
That would never happen.
exactly, exactly. You picked that up perfectly, my friend, right? So, it's this inversion of priorities that is hurting families and it's hurting healthcare providers. It's just this inversion of priorities that a 5-day-old blastocyst embryo should have the same rights as a living, breathing human. And there again, actual living, breathing humans are going hungry, they're homeless, they're being shot down in their schools. We're not shouting
Yeah.
about life there.
Nope. So here's a reality. We've all seen patients benefit from root cause work. How many HSG babies have you seen? I've seen a bunch, right? That means is that HSG procedure is basically pushing dye through the uterus and the fallopian tubes so that we can see if the tubes are blocked. And sometimes that pressure of that contrast going in through the tubes kind of pushes everything open and everything opens up. And then the next month, when they're getting ready to start with whatever treatment they're going to be doing, they come back to the clinic and they say, "Hey, by the way, I'm pregnant." And we're like, "Cool, HSG baby."
What about the person for whom the dye wouldn't go through because the tubes were blocked? And there is nothing restorative that we can do. And therefore, there's a lot of different times like that. Our reproductive organs, our gonads, our testes, and our ovaries are very sensitive to metabolic changes in the body. They are hormone driven by nature. And so because of that, we see that sometimes correcting that insulin resistance allows the ovaries to go back to a normal function. So that you could call restorative reproductive medicine. But again, as we've said, we're already doing that. That is already a hallmark of the process. And not every patient fits that model either. What about cancer survivors? What about patient with an absent vas deferens, which is sort of like the male equivalent of fallopian tubes? So the sperms have to get where they're going and they need the vas deferens to get there. There are people born without a vas deferens. It's called congenital absence of the vas deferens. And so what about those folks? Are they not restorable? What about LGBTQ couples? What about single parents by choice? What about all those folks?
But the RRM doesn't even acknowledge them.
Nope.
They actually say it is for a man and a woman. That's literally what it says.
It's appreciate that you brought that out because it's fertility care designed only for heterosexual cisgendered couples. And that, my friends, is not medicine. It's not. It's ideology. And again, I'll say it a million times. When you use ideology to legislate, you have by definition left out a massive piece of the population.
Yep. And you know me, I always go worst case scenario, right? So what if Obergefell versus Hodges falls and marriage equality gets rolled back?
What happens to non biological parents adopting their partner's child? Are we going to go back in time and relitigate custody on those children? Like what happens to LGBTQ parents seeking fertility care? Like they will completely be left out because if marriage equality gets rolled back, then no doubt we're going down that path of remember when you and I first got into the field, the consents used to say husband and wife, but quickly we were like, hey, look, that's not very inclusive. There's a lot of different situations where folks have kids that isn't husband and wife. And so think about reciprocal IVF, where a same sex female couple carries each other's fertilized egg. If you're going to come take custody away from the mother who carried the baby, that's insanity.
Yeah. Back to the consent thing, we went to partner instead of husband wife. Patient and partner is, what consent's turned into is,
Yep.
and it's not just, for the LGBT community. How many people are not married and they go through IVF and they do IUI and they do not want to get married, and that is a choice that they can have.
I think you brought it up earlier. It's let's say the quiet part out loud. It's fertility care designed only for heterosexual couples. So there are folks that are listening that say, well, that's fine. Who cares about the LGBTQ folks that won't be able to get care anymore? No, who cares about the unmarried? We don't want unwed mothers, right? Like that's the point. The point
Yeah.
is to roll us back to some 1950s conservative view of how everyone else should live their life. And I'm here to
It,
tell folks that you can tell yourself how to live your own life, but you cannot go telling me and everyone else how I can
mm-hmm,
live mine. You don't like gay marriage? Don't get gay married. You don't think
mm,
people should be single parents by choice? Don't become a single parent by choice.
word.
Sorry, man.
Word.
But it's just,
Preach.
to me, it's let's just keep saying that quiet part out loud because the point is that they don't want non cisgendered, non heterosexual people to have children. In fact, I saw something this morning that I saw it yesterday and it was extremely disconcerting because did you see that the current vice president of the United States said that Labor Day actually should refer to women who have children, and only women who have children should be allowed to celebrate Labor Day, even though Labor Day has nothing to do with the labor and delivery of a child at all. Labor Day does not. I would challenge our vice president to do a little bit of legitimate research there and clarify his position. However, he said the quiet part out loud, which is that only if you have babies are you of any use to society. That's what was said,
That was
effectively.
so good. Yeah. My response to that is meow.
Meow.
Just meow.
Exactly. Hashtag
Meow.
cats on a couch. Sorry.
Let's get back. Sorry, we segued out of there, but let's get back. Dismissing IVF in favor of RRM isn't just about medicine. It's about narrowing who is even allowed to build a family.
Once again, it's about
Yes.
control. It's about saying we decide who gets to count as a family, aka marriage equality. We get to decide all the things. Let's talk about why patients are so vulnerable to this kind of rhetoric. Because fertility clinics are sometimes not that great at customer service.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's a little understatement. Yeah.
it's not because everyone there doesn't care, but you have delayed callbacks. You have confusing financial pictures where insurance might or might not cover this or that. And you might need this procedure, but you might not. And then if we get here, you might need this. And then you might need $2,000 more worth of medications in the middle of your IVF cycle that you weren't expecting. And so you've got delayed callbacks, got confusing financials, you've got often vague answers. And they're again not because we want to be vague, but because we're still learning so
Mhm.
much about fertility treatment. And I used to tell my patients that IVF or fertility treatment in general is just as much diagnostic as it is treatment, which means there will be things that we will only learn about you and your body through doing fertility
Through
treatments because
Yeah,
we
yeah,
never could have learned that otherwise. And so,
right.
but when patients feel dismissed, what do? They turn to forums, they turn to social media, they do their research. And I'm not trying to be condescending, but the term research has gotten very loose since the internet. And so RRM messaging sounds really shiny and really supportive.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of like the indoctrination pipeline. Like, girl, you don't need IVF. Just try this supplement. Just try this. You're good. You don't need that.
Let's talk about how RRM actually can be detrimental, right? Because you and I both know that the biggest enemy to fertility is age, female age of the egg. So women are extremely unlucky in that our eggs, they've been there since we were in our mother's womb. They kind of just been getting stale over time. And so by a certain time, they don't work as well. They've been there a while. Genetically, they're not as awesome. And so what that means is that every year over 30, a female's fertility starts really declining. And then over 35, it starts plummeting. So in early days of your fertility, each month is not as rapid of a decline, but as you age, there's a much more rapid decline in the genetic sustainability or the genetic underpinning of a good, healthy egg. And so, because of that, things like RRM, where there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and there's not a lot of hurry to get to the treatment because, by definition, you want to restore it all so it can do it by itself. But what does that mean? That means you're losing very precious time.
Time.
We're
Yeah.
losing time, right? And you've seen that with
Yeah.
patients. 1 month,
How
two
many
months make,
have all the
yep,
difference? And being at a fertility clinic, when people walk in the door, number one, they don't want to be there, right?
they don't
Nobody
want to
wants
be
to
there.
be, they don't want to be there. They don't want to
Nope.
be in a fertility clinic.
Nope. Said when you were growing up, I guarantee you, if you ever thought about becoming a parent, this wasn't what you had in mind.
Exactly. And they come in here, and by the time that they get to a fertility clinic, in my experience, they wanted to be pregnant yesterday,
Yesterday.
and they
I
don't
used to
even
say
want to
that to
wait.
patients too. I was like, I get it. You wanted to be pregnant yesterday, right?
Yeah,
I hate to break
absolutely.
it to you, but unfortunately, like there's a little ways to go still because
Yeah.
they don't even know that. They think that they're going to get there and then magically the next month they're going to be pregnant. It's going to be amazing. And that's not
Yeah. Or
quite the reality.
they're going to walk out the door after that first appointment with medications in hand,
And
go
a calendar
home, take these
and
medications. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's all going to work out. But by the time they get to the fertility clinic, they're done with diagnostic. They're like, we want to get started ASAP. We want to
right.
get started today.
Yeah,
And there were some clinics where they're like, okay, you can try an IUI cycle. We'll give you some letrozole. But in the same time, we're doing the diagnostics at the same time, lab work. semen analysis, things like that. So there's no surprises at the IUI. So long as all the blood work comes out fine, they're okay with doing the IUI cycle. Fine. However, there are many clinics that I've worked for as well that will not allow that. You must go through diagnostics because why would we want you to spend money and
Mm-hmm.
insurance cycles?
Want to make sure we set you up for the best 3 cycles that we can.
Yes, exactly. So, like, if your tubes are blocked, then why are we doing IUI? That makes no sense.
Exactly.
The thing is that RRM, yes, they want to restore natural conception, which takes time. And like you were saying, precious time, especially as women get older and our eggs just don't want to cooperate. So when they walk in that door, we're not pushing IVF on them. We are trying to find a root cause, but we are also trying to get them to a place where they want to be the best way we can
Exactly.
with the information that we have. So whether it be starting metformin and your PCOS and you know what? Oh, you start ovulating again. Wonderful. We're not going to say, "Oh, you have to go straight to IVF." That's not how
Right.
it works.
No,
But
I've never
at the
chased
same
a
time,
patient out the door and been like, "Oh my god, you're pregnant on your own? That's not allowed." Like,
yeah,
what do we
get out.
do? We celebrate that. That's one of the best days of any fertility professional's career is when you have a patient in queue to do some sort of treatment cycle and they're calling, they're like, "I didn't get my period." And I understand. And that's very triggering, activating for a lot of fertility patients to even consider. And yet we
Yeah.
see it all the time where patients get pregnant on their own while they're waiting. And that is wonderful. We celebrate that. We are
Yeah.
so excited about that. It's one of the best calls I would ever make when a patient
I
calls with
love those.
no period and they're like waiting to start a cycle and they're just frustrated because they have no period and then they're pregnant. And that happens all the time. I think something else we didn't talk about, but we should, is that the concept of restorative reproductive medicine assumes that it can be restored. And I worry about patients that go into it with the mindset that, okay, we haven't been able to conceive, but it can be restored. And then, as we mentioned, you get something like a tubal, abnormality or no tubes at all, or a bicornuate uterus, or whatever we find that was never restorable. And
I
that
mean,
worries me.
yeah, it doesn't. It's not just like physiology. I'm also thinking like genetics too. It's
Yeah,
something that could be someone has a terrible disease in their family, or you don't have it, but you're a carrier of it, and so is your partner. That's
that's
something
not
that,
restorable.
yeah, that is
And
like,
we have treatments for that. So
yes.
it's, we as healthcare professionals take an oath to do no harm. And
Mhm.
I really would go so far as saying that RRM is potentially harmful because it is
It
leading
could,
patients to believe a certain narrative about fertility that just isn't medically sound. Right. And so when healthcare professionals are painted like they're greedy and they're uncaring or things like because we were talking about how does this happen, how do folks get caught up in these things, and I think part of it is that it's having infertility is horrible, it's so isolating, it's so demeaning, there's so much control that's taken away that it's such a hard thing to go through. And I remember when I was teaching new nurses and new medical assistants that were new to fertility, and I would say, you have to be very confident in your words because our patients can sniff like doubt miles away. And it's
mm,
not their fault. That doubt happens because there has been so much of the process that has just been taken, all choice has been taken away. And so they're very susceptible to things like forums where folks and also extremely susceptible to, well, I know, doctor, that I'm 42 and blah, 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 but my 42-year-old friend just got pregnant and had a baby. Right?
mhm,
And
yeah.
it's so understandable to have that hope when you see that. But I don't know that if you ever had this epiphany of, I'm sure you did, but as I got into fertility medicine, the more I was in awe of the fact that you can even get pregnant naturally, right? Because when you
Seriously,
start
yes.
studying the physiology of conception, it's fascinating.
It's
And
crazy.
yeah, it's absolutely overwhelming how complex it is. And I also tell folks your outcome your outcome doesn't just depend on you, it depends on the sperm. Depends on your partner,
Mhm,
or if you're male, it depends on her. This is a two-way street. This is a 50-50 equation. So you could come in
mhm.
here today and have one outcome from your workup and treatment with partner A, and you could come with partner B and have a completely different outcome because, as you mentioned, we're talking about genetics. We're talking about things that even the smartest of us do not fully and completely understand. Because if we fully understood, we could do something about it. But human reproduction is a miracle. It absolutely is a miracle. And it's a
It really
miracle
is.
that we have been able to bring our field as far as we have.
Mhm.
But as we were saying, patients do turn to things like forum and social media and things like RRM because they're looking for anything to give them hope. And it's
Hope.
very unnerving and it's very concerning as an expert in this field. And I know you feel the same way. It's very concerning that there are folks walking around that think all they have to do is do the vitamins and the things and then they're going to get pregnant because you and I both know that's not true.
Yeah, absolutely. It just it just builds that distrust with the medical field in general, and there is a lot of medical mistrust right now going on out there. It's really scary and, in general, but to take it just to our field, there are times where I feel like and I read the boards, I like to read them
Sure.
because I wanna know what is happening out there. What are patients saying? What are they saying about people? How are their experiences going? And, you see those reviews and you see those board messages that are kind of like, well, the fertility clinics, they're just out for a money grab. They're out for a cash grab. They're just making money, hand over fist. And it's not like fertility doctors are not like, "Hey, I'm gonna go ride my Porsche and play golf all day." That is not a fertility doctor, that is not an REI. An REI, everyone that I've ever worked with and been with have always been very caring, very aware, and spent so many hours of their own time, of their free time, taking calls
Of their
when they're with their
family's time.
family.
Yeah.
Yes, and,
No, and also fertility medicine, folks, it's not a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 gig. It's
no.
not. Folks ovulate when they ovulate, they're ready when they're ready. I've had to come in to do an IUI on a Sunday morning, um,
Yeah.
before, and it's just how it is, right? So I love that you made that point. And I'd also like to point out that it needs to be understood that the physicians who are backing RRM are often not even OBGYNs and they're definitely not REIs. But my
Mhm.
point is that a reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialist goes to medical school. Then they complete an OBGYN residency of 3 years. And then they complete a REI reproductive endocrinology and infertility fellowship for 3 years. So that patient has spent 4 years in undergrad, 4 years in med school, 4, 8, and 11. So what is that, 14 years? My math is somewhere
Something like
correct.
that.
So think
Yeah.
about, so because I do hear some folks say, well, like, fertility doctors make so much a year. Okay, first of all, 7 days a week. Your time is never your own. But also, there were 14 years of your life that everyone else was out there making a paycheck and you were in school. So I
Mhm.
do think that it's really important to understand that fertility doctors have such a specialized and fertility nurses. I ran
Mhm.
into a woman yesterday at an event out here in Apache Junction, Arizona, and we shook hands. She's like, "You're a nurse? I'm a nurse too." And she said, this woman was 73. She said, "I'm going to work till the day I die. I love being a nurse." And she said, "Well, what kind of nurse are you?" I work like as a patient advocate. And I said, "Oh, that's awesome. I'm a fertility nurse." And she goes, "Oh, you are? Oh my gosh. Fertility nurses. Oh my God. They're so smart. What? You're a fertility nurse? You could do anything if you're a fertility nurse." I'll tell you, when I get
Yeah.
when I get some reports, I go, you know what? I don't know what that means. Let me go call a fertility nurse. It really is a highly specialized field where we
Mhm.
spend so much time learning the nuances. And that is what is concerning about RRM because we have family practice doctors who are practicing RRM. I'm sorry, but if if I ca- if I can't get pregnant, I want to go to the person that's going to give me the best chance of that. And I would say more often than not, it's not the RRM provider. And they aren't really even qualified to even weigh in. And that's a bit harsh because I will say that OBGYNs do and can serve a role in infertility
Absolutely.
care, in workup. There's a lot of different ways that we could talk about this in a different episode because we know we have a supply and demand problem. We know far more people need care than we have supply. And that's actually probably part of where RRM weaseled its way in a way, because it is, right? At one point, I had a year long wait list at my clinic. That's terrible, right? So I think that it's natural to be like, let's find other ways and let's do that. But let's not mislead people in the process.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
when you do, this is the last thing I'll say is when you mislead people in the process, there is something they may never have a family because of that. That choice to mislead them is life altering. It's life altering.
Exactly. I
So,
I think you said it best when you said reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialists. It's right there in the name. Reproductive endocrinology. So they're looking at everything else, not just infertility. All right. So, final takeaway. It's not new. It's not revolutionary. It's a diagnostic medicine that's repackaged with an ideology.
yep, you are that's perfectly said. It is just what we're already doing, sprinkled with
Mhm.
some ideology and called something different. And at the end of the day, patients deserve autonomy. They deserve honesty. They deserve evidence based options. And they truly deserve the whole menu, so to speak, of care, right? All
Yep.
the options, not a bait and switch. And
No,
that's where this is so concerning.
if you take one thing away today, infertility is medical, it's not moral.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And because it's September, shout out to PCOS Awareness Month. I'd like everyone watching to note that AnnMarie is such a dedicated fertility nurse that she wore her pearls because PCOS is often called like pearl ovaries or there's a string of pearls in the ovaries. So just a nod. You're so dedicated. But September is PCOS Awareness Month. So big shout out to everybody dealing with PCOS. It is such a hard spot. So we see you, we hear you, we're here for you. You're welcome to send us an email or drop something in the comments if there's any way we can be helpful. But PCOSers, we see you.
So we'll wrap it up there. We want to thank you for listening to the Repro Files. Don't forget to like, share, leave a review, and remember science, not spin.
And acronyms, though, always acronyms. Once again, it's such an honor to bring this information to you every week. And all of you who have listened, who have subscribed, who have liked, who have done all the things, we're so appreciative. And yes, we'll be back next week with more acronyms.
Yay!